All right, season 4, episode 1 of Man in the High Castle. This is a deep dive review. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. It's a really good show. Yeah, let's just get into it. So season 4 starts off pretty much right at the end of season 3. Juliana, she's meditating. She transports herself into the alternate universe. She falls into the flower bed just as she gets shot by John Smith, and she falls into the flower bed essentially as she's meditating to transport herself into the alternate universe. She realizes that she's in the alternate universe. She looks over her shoulder. She sees the American flag, so she realizes that it was successful. She was successfully able to transport herself. Stumbles into the road, and this is where we get a glimpse of where we're at. The car stops, and the license plate is Virginia, 1963. So we get our first glimpse of approximate location that we're at least in the alternate universe. Alternate Smith and Thomas, they find her, they get her to a hospital, and then we go back to the regular universe for the procession, which is intercut with scenes from the assassination. So we get the procession of Tagomi's funeral, intercut with scenes of what happened, the assassination attempt. That was, I believe it was supposed to be an assassination attempt on the Crown Princess's life, and or maybe both, but they only got Tagomi. Keto seems to feel somewhat responsible. You can tell kind of on the look on his face that he feels a little bit responsible for the fact that Tagomi was killed. And then once the procession's over, they're having the service, and the Crown Princess she's clearly calling out this constant military presence in the Pacific States. This is actually historically accurate. The Emperor of Japan at the end of World War II, I believe it was after the second atomic bomb, the military side of Japan was willing to continue fighting even after the second atomic bomb, but the emperor was like, no, that's enough, we're surrendering. So this is actually historically accurate, where the crown prince and princess, they want to stop the fighting, they want to stop the bloodshed, at least temporarily. They want to start to work toward peace, whereas the military guys, they are like, no, we need to stamp this rebellion out. And you can see that with, they're telling Keto's boss, basically, even the Crown Princess tells him, do your investigation and then give me the report. And Keto's boss is like, no, you're not going to do that. And Keto's boss believes that the princess is overstepping her bounds, does not want to stop the path that they're on at all. And that's when they get a report of a Nazi incursion into the neutral zone, and we cut to Wyatt and his men and women fighting against the Nazis. So this is clearly it's probably actually a small incursion. They're doing the best that they can with the weapons that they have. The Nazis have tanks and armored transports. Then we get a couple of helicopters that come flying through towards the end of the scene. They managed to take out a few Nazis, but they pretty much get obliterated by the helicopters. They lose a lot of men. They're not able to get their munitions through. The films, the movies, those all get destroyed. Wyatt, Lem, and a few others make it out. Shortly after that, you get John Smith and his friend, who we don't know this yet. It happens in a later episode, but it turns out that they're army buddies from during World War II. They, at the end of the war, when the Nazis won in this universe, they decided to join the Nazi Party, or to join the Nazis in order to gain high positions of high power. But his buddy is obviously kind of enjoying this. I mean, this is what these guys are trained to do. So he's kind of enjoying the fact that they actually got to fight a little bit. And he's kind of surprised that John isn't enjoying it as much, which I think he finds this kind of strange. I believe this is like our first hint that John has kind of pushed any thoughts he had against the right. They're just completely pushed down in his mind. They don't ever come to the surface at all. So John has kind of he's at this point becoming completely he has become a Nazi, and accepted this way of life, whereas his buddy puts on a good show, but his buddy doesn't really seem to believe it, and I think we get some hints of that in this scene, because his buddy even mentions whether or not, he's even though he's still got the kind of the military mentality, he wants to keep pushing through and just go ahead and conquer the Pacific states. He's referring to it as uniting the country under one flag, not necessarily to spread the Reich, just unite the country under one flag. Whereas John just kind of wants to take it easy and let the Japanese empire collapse on its own. His buddy also is wondering if the Reich was responsible for the assassination attempt, or for the assassination of Tagomi. John doesn't actually answer that, and I think it's just because John doesn't feel it's necessary to respond to it. Because if it was a secret mission, then he's still, he can't talk. He's not gonna talk. He's not gonna entertain it. He doesn't believe it's a necessary question to even entertain. And then, of course, John heads off to, I believe it's Montana, to go see Helen and the girls. This is where we get, I believe this is the point, we get a glimpse of, this is where we see Helen and the girls. Helen, her hair is down. This is a major change for her character. She's usually in very sharp, dark clothing and things like that. I referred to that in my full review. And her clothing now is much looser. I mean, obviously it's more appropriate for a farm, but it's much looser. Her hair is down, kind of like she's freer. Her hair isn't all bound up and tight in a bun or anything like that. The daughters are also wearing, I guess you'd say, more farm-appropriate clothing, but they're just kind of brighter clothes. John shows up at some point, and of course, John is still, even though his collar is not, it's unbuttoned to show that he's a little bit looser, but he's still wearing all black, just all black. And even in a later scene, when he doesn't have the full jacket on, his clothes are all black. So John's the contrast there between how John looks in the house and how everybody else looks in the house is very apparent. We get a look at how the black people are living under Japanese rule. They're I would say it's the housing is just very packed in together apartments, and it's pretty clear that they're living in fear. And I mean, why wouldn't they be? Because when the Japanese are investigating something, they're pounding on doors. They come pounding on doors and they drag people out of their apartments, and then they just grab a bunch of people and tell everyone else, if we don't get information that we're looking for, then these guys don't come back. So it's really no different than how the Nazis were in Germany during World War II, when they would just take people away. So yeah, we get a little look at how they're living. We also see though that they're smuggling weapons and hiding them in their floors. So they're obviously preparing for rebellion. Something else worth pointing out in this scene is that all the other black men, except for Elijah, all the rest of them, when they're pulled out of their apartments and thrown up against the wall, they all they're hanging their head down. They're barely even looking up. They're not making any eye contact at all. They're trying to not be picked out. Belle is also, she's trying to keep her head down. She's trying to look up a little bit. Elijah is the one person who's not. He is holding his head up high. Now he's kind of got his head turned away from them still, but he's holding his head up high. And it was established in a previous scene, but he does not like hanging his head in shame to the Japanese. So he basically refuses to do it. Now, you'd almost expect that they might grab him in that case, because they grab a bunch of guys, they come to him, they see him doing this, they skip him, they go to the next guy everyone they grab is holding their head down. And it might seem like, well, why wouldn't they just grab him? He's the one who's kind of standing up to them. Well, they wouldn't grab him because he'll probably be harder to break, and he'll take a lot longer to break. They're gonna take the guys who are showing fear. They'll be easier to break. It'll be easier to get a confession or more information out of those guys than it will be to get it out of Elijah. And in fact, they do get information. Whether or not the information is true, we don't know. They do get information about somebody else from one of these guys that they took. So that's something to note. When Lem is driving Wyatt back to like a meeting point after the battle that they just fought, and I think there's all of like 10 guys in this whole scene, and Wyatt says, "Is this it?" Because I think it's like he was expecting that more people had survived, and no, like I said, I think there's like 10 people that showed up and maybe even less than that. So he's pretty much like done. He's ready to give up. He's just like, look, everybody's dead. We don't have any guns, nothing. Lem is able to convince him that no, we need to keep fighting. And that's when Wyatt talks about getting a meeting with the BCR. This episode kind of ends with Lem gets a meeting in the back of a car with Belle from the BCR, for Wyatt and Belle. So that's pretty much the last we see of them in this episode. We also see that Juliana is teaching a class on how to meditate and I guess try to reach enlightenment is what she's teaching them. And we see that she's in some kind of, I'm going to call it kind of an in-between place. She's able to meditate and go into this like in-between world. I would call it between the two dimensions, because as far as she knows, there's only two dimensions right now. So she's going into this middle dimension, and she sees Tagomi, and it seems that he's trying to send a message, not necessarily to her, but he's just trying to send a message. She sees it, and she's trying to figure out what this message is, and what it is and what it means. And we see her in this in-between universe a couple of times. The second time, she also, as she's seeing what Tagomi has drawn in the sand, she then sees all these, I guess you could say they're people on the horizon, kind of coming out of the brightness. They're coming out on the horizon. This might be actually a hint toward what happened in the last episode with everyone coming from all those different worlds. It's when I first watched the episode, it was just, you know, kind of weird, and her reaction is like, what is this, what's going on? But watching it a second time, I think that's what that is that there's these people who are learning to meditate, and they are also able to go into this in-between world. I mean, we saw a woman in season 3 who, while laying on the table, was able to meditate and transport herself away. I had assumed at the time that she transported herself to the alternate universe. She could have transported herself to any other universe, you know, now that we've seen to the end of season 4. Something else that's worth noticing is that when Juliana's looking at the newspaper, she's reading about the Saturn rocket that they're getting ready to test again, and she mentions, you know, all these failures. She doesn't realize, she hasn't put it together yet, that the failures are being caused by the other universe sending people to sabotage the program. So she doesn't realize this yet, because she doesn't have any suspicion at all that anybody else is coming into this universe, or at least any Nazis are coming into this universe. She's just, you know, she's really just making comments about it. It's not till a much later episode that that she starts to put it all together. I think that's all I have for season 4, episode 1. No, there's one other thing. When John is getting ready, he's talking to Helen about, you know, coming back home and all that. I think it becomes pretty clear that John, he has effectively turned and become a Nazi. He no longer holds any of the American values that he would have held before, because when Helen says, you know, oh, people here, they talk about the things that no one talks about, and John says, well, what things? You know, I don't think he's being ignorant, purposely ignorant, or anything like that. I think he truly believes now everything that the Reich teaches, even because Helen even said, they murdered our son, and he was like, don't blame me for that. And it's like, well, why not? You could have, because I mean, he did try to stop it, but he also could have been there. He could have been there, and they could have, instead of him trying to hide it, they could have just been like, you know what, let's run. But he's been on this path for so long that he doesn't know how to stop. I mean, he says that at the end of the season, but that's what has happened to him. He doesn't know how to stop anymore. So he follows the rules. He does what needs to be done. He has become, for all intents and purposes, a Nazi. And Helen hasn't. She was willing to follow those rules when they didn't affect her, but now that they're actually going to affect her, she finds them abhorrent, and she does not want to be in that world any longer. I know she does go back. I don't remember what episode it's in right now. That'll be in another review. But she stays on the farm because she does not want any part of that world. And yeah, I think that's all I have on this episode. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you have anything you want to add, if you think I missed anything, go ahead and comment on it below. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit that notification bell so you get notified of future videos. And we'll see you in the next one.